Hello, everybody. It's Michael Pierce here. It's John Barnes. We're here in person. No movie magic at all. See? Look. See?
Yeah.
I'm here. Here, hit me, John. Thank you.
Gotcha.
We're here in person, and we're going to do an interview, and we're going to talk about everything. Really, we're going to cover everything in this video. So hopefully the audio will be good. We are here in the forest, and that's all I'm going to tell you.
Yeah. We're in England.
Yes, that's right. We're going to do an interview with Jack Aaron next.
Rupert Sheldrake is here.
Rupert Sheldrake? Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. Is Rupert Sheldrake, Jack Aaron. Who else is in London?
I don't know.
I don't know who else is in London.
Charles Darwin was.
Charles Darwin. We will go do a seance.
We have some beef with him.
Charles Darwin.
Yeah.
I'm a little more okay with Charles Darwin than I think you are. But anyway, I'm assuming that you all should know John Barnes at this point. I mean, maybe not all of you. If you don't know, then John Barnes also has a channel, and we've known each other for 10 years now.
Yeah.
Because I think we met in 2014 online.
Yeah.
Through the channel. Because I started posting in 2014, 15, and then John, I'll give my little side of the story. John sent me, as I recall, a video about intuition. You were talking about intuition in like terms of essence. This is before I think. Yeah, do you remember that?
Vaguely.
Yeah.
I know that's one of the videos that I have taken down.
Yeah. It's not up anymore, but I don't know if you still have it for posterity's sake.
I probably still have it.
Yeah.
Is it one of the whiteboard ones?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yes, because I didn't see your face in that video.
Yeah, I was embarrassed by the production value of that. Yeah. It was a bit sloppy.
We'll see how embarrassed we are about the production value of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you sent me that video, and I was just really struck by your presentation style, despite the production value. I just thought the ideas were really good. And I began corresponding a bit with you, and it was kind of on and off at first. You interviewed me at one point. You were one of the first people to interview me.
Yeah, I've also taken that down.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, did you? Oh, I forgot about that.
I just remember being like very like acting up, like kind of doing like an ENTP character.
Oh, really?
Pretty much, yeah.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. That's how it seemed to me.
Yeah.
Afterwards.
Yeah, I'd have to watch it again, but it's taken down, so you'll never know.
Well, it's not fair because I was in high school when
that
stuff was going on.
This is true. I was in my undergraduate. You were in high school.
I was just a baby.
You were much younger. I was the master.
Yes.
That's where I was at.
Yes.
Now I'm like the retired old master, and I'm doing quantum mechanics stuff.
Well, no. Now, if we're being Greek, you're like in your.
Oh,
you're in your young man zone. You're
you're right, because I did turn an age I will not disclose because I'm paranoid.
Yes.
About the internet. So now y'all can guess at what that is.
Yes.
But anyway, so we met that way, and we've talked about typology, and then where things really kind of, because we were definitely friends at that point, I would feel like. And then, we would go for large spans where we weren't talking, just cause. I think you sent me letters at one point, which was really nice. And I don't know if I wrote you back, and I think it just emailed you because I didn't want that letter. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
No, you wrote me back.
Oh, I did write you back?
I remember getting an address from you that I was surprised by. I was like, what?
Oh.
Why is he there? That's random.
I'll have to ask you about that after one.
Yeah.
I think I remember you telling me that. Anyway. What I should have said at the beginning of this video is welcome to the John Barnes experience.
Yeah.
He's interviewing me, Michael Pierce, on the Joe Rogan experience.
Yes.
That's a dumb joke. I'll edit that out. I can edit this. I probably won't, but it'll be funny now that I've said that.
So I will say Michael is at this undisclosed location with me because my grandparents died, and so he's been getting the full Barnes family experience. It's not actually the Barnes family; it's my mother's side. So he's been very gracious because you wouldn't really know it from me because everybody accuses me of being INTP, but my family is extremely extroverted and extremely talkative, and yeah, Michael has been cornered many times.
Oh, it's been fine.
Yeah,
It's been fine.
Yeah.
They have been very gracious to me, I feel. So I've appreciated it. I have not felt put upon any more than I would feel put upon by normal social situations.
Okay, cool.
So
Cool.
I've been good. But yay, friendship. So, and so the big thing in my mind that kind of happened was the COVID came around. Yeah, 2020. I finished my book, Motes and Beams, that summarized a lot of what I've been trying to do on the channel, and put that out. And you read Motes and Beams and got very excited, as I recall, and made a video.
Yeah.
And I think you emailed me too.
Yeah.
And and the main thing I remember from the video is you saying he needs to let go of Nietzsche.
Oh, did I say that?
Yeah, you did say that. You did say that. Don't feel embarrassed.
I'm so embarrassed.
We were all going through a hard time at that point, whether we looked like it or not. So, but yeah, once you did that, we started. I mean, it was great. I thought it was awesome because that was the point. Because at that point, I had finished my undergrad and I was applying for grad schools. And I think around that time, I had applied for, because it was 2020. Maybe I was waiting to hear back. Anyway, I got rejected from a number of programs. It was very disheartening and humbling. But that's when I really began in earnest looking into quantum mechanics, which I've already done some videos on that. And I intend to do some more in the future. I'll put links in the description. But it was in talking with John during that period that I made a number of really important leaps, actually. In fact, yes, it was not after I had applied for it. It was while I was preparing my first essay to apply to PhD programs. Yes, yeah, on consciousness, and it was when talking about that, and that I'm going to tell the little story because this is just very. I will always remember. I was in a Zoom call because we didn't meet in person for years and years and years. We didn't meet in person until I was
till 2023.
Yeah. Till I was actually in grad school, and you came and visited me at the campus, which was awesome. But we were on the Zoom call, and I can't remember what led to this, but I was talking about, actually we were talking about like the Eucharist.
We were talking about the Eucharist.
We were, yeah. And you were asking me whether I believed it was the literal body and blood of Christ.
Right.
And I was like, well, I mean, symbolically, yes. But, I mean, if you asked me literally, if you look down at the atoms, like, or do the atoms literally turn into like hemoglobin or whatever? And you were like, stop right there. What do you mean by literally?
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean by asking me that?
What do you mean?
I don't know what you mean. And that you gave me something that I had just never thought of before as a perspective there of the way I conceptualized it is of like different levels of reality, and they all have equal merit. And they are all equally real, so that to what I was effectively doing was I was treating the materialistic atom level, like the material level as well, but that's the literal level.
That's the most real.
You know, that's the most real. And you're like, well, is that the most real? Or if, you know, how religious are you? Actually, Michael, like, you like, you didn't say it that way, but this is just kind of how I conceptualized it. From there, it was in doing the essay that I also began running into, I think of them all as ideas from Catholic theology, you know. So that, for example, is sort of that's more from Jonathan Peugeot and Matthew Peugeot.
I don't consider myself to be like in like the mainline Catholic theology. I just am watching Peugeot videos and kind of riffing off of that. But that is, you know, they have a more traditional way of going about things. So it links up very nicely with
Yes.
Catholic theology. So.
Yes, this is very interesting because we have very. That's something else we might talk about in this video is our different religious backgrounds and how that is very much because I would say we're both quite devout,
Very pious.
very pious, and but in very different traditions. But they have a lot of interesting similarities, but a lot of interesting. This is a bug. It's very interesting. And endlessly. Well, we'll get into that more, but. The point is that the two main things was that levels of reality thing, but in some sense, even more importantly, and I don't remember a specific conversation for this, but it was thinking in terms of parts and wholes and making that, which is very important for Aristotle and Plato, but also was sort of, I don't know, not assimilated, but like whatever the Hegelian term is for like taking something and elevating it. Aufgehung?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. All I know about Hegel is the thesis, antithesis, synthesis thing, which I'm told is not actually
Hegel. I believe that was Fichte. Correct us in the comments.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure it was Fichte who came right before Hegel. But in any case, the parts and wholes, which, as I think I've mentioned a bit of that in my videos on quantum mechanics. I've been talking a bunch, but. Just to sort of wrap it up, we've been talking a lot more regularly, which has been wonderful. I've really, really enjoyed that. We're talking a lot more about quantum mechanics. John has been extremely helpful as a ENTP foil to my ideas and asking me questions and getting me to explain things. And what do you have to say?
Well, I want to add to the 2020 reconnection.
Oh, okay.
That I was taking a substance.
Oh, I didn't know if you were going to mention
which I will not name because I don't want to encourage anybody else to take this substance. But it was making me a little bit manic. So I reached out when I was in a very like manic mode at the end of 2020. And I was like, I feel like the insight that I had at that period though is still the insight that I'm like working out with the Myers-Briggs stuff, which had to do with introversion and extroversion's connections with parts and whole stuff that we've been talking about.
Which you've talked about in some of your videos. I guess we should clarify what we mean by the parts and wholes in case any of you aren't sure. It's a metaphysical idea. It's pointing out the way I think of it anyway is that you have you can start at the bottom, as it were, and that would be whatever the atoms of your theory are, and those are the smallest unities. Because in order for something to be a thing, this is not how we normally think about things, at least not how I normally thought about things, but in order for something to be a thing, it has to be one thing, right? So John, insofar as he actually exists as a thing, is one thing with one name, John. The chair has a name, but also the parts of the chair could each be extracted and treated as unities in themselves. And so normally the way people think about this, or the effect of the atomistic, materialistic picture of the universe is to talk about these sorts of entities as though, well, and this is what I was originally telling to John when he interrupted me effectively, is that, you can take the chair and you can throw it into a furnace and set it on fire and break it down into its smallest components, and you break it down until you can't break it down anymore, and that stuff is the real stuff. That's the atomistic, materialistic view. Everything else is just emergent properties off of the atomic structure. It's just, and the only reason that we don't only teach, say, quantum physics in classes simply because the higher levels are so complicated in how they tier up from the quantum level that it's impractical to do so. But I'm very much against the idea of emergent properties in the just purely phenomenological sense, in the sense of because people, when they use this notion of emergent properties, which is to say you have a system of these individual parts, but when you put them all together, then they start acting in a way that produces these higher patterns that you couldn't get from. So if you think of like the chair and the sunlight and all of the things around us as being emergent properties from the atoms and quantum particles doing things, then if you think that, most people when they say that, they're like, oh, this is a way so that I can have chairs and atoms, but they don't make the extra step of saying, so is the chair itself real or is it just atoms? In order to make, I hope this is making sense, but in order to make that step, you need something extra, as far as I'm concerned. You have to admit that there is a form to the chair, because if you, there is something metaphysical that is behind the chair for you to say it is as real as the atoms, even though it is perishable. Because if you don't do that, then as far as I'm concerned, you're just evoking magic, really. I mean, you're basically just doing it under the table to refer to the chair as a chair and not as a concatenation of atoms. I was thinking about this in terms of human beings, because people talk about consciousness and how does consciousness arise from the neurons in the brain, right? And it's like, well, why stop at the neurons? How does it arise from the particles in the brain? How does it, and that's what Roger Penrose is kind of trying to do. But you end up having to rely on this notion of, this sort of magical notion of emergent properties. Oh, the consciousness just kind of arises out of it. And it's like, but then I'm not, where am I in this picture? Where is the unity that is me in this picture? If you break me down, then you just have a bunch of little unities, and I don't know if that makes sense, but I didn't know if you wanted to add
I think that was
anything.
perfectly, yeah.
Thank you. So that's kind of what we mean by parts and wholes. You end up with almost like a hierarchy of parts and wholes, where you can start at the bottom with like monads, if you want to use a more esoteric term.
Sorry, I squinted my eyes. I don't know what monad means. People.
I'll just stick with atoms.
Okay.
Atoms, whatever the smallest thing is, and you have, an infinite number, or however many you have, however you want to work your theory. But then you have tiered levels. The moment that you put two atoms together, you get a molecule, and the molecule has different properties. But the reason it has those different properties, I would argue, is not simply as an emergence. Excuse me. In some cases, it may just be an emergence. I'm fine with that, but I do feel like there are at least certain things. There are through lines, and maybe it's far more expansive. I'm trying to be very conservative with the principle, but it seems to me at some point you end up having to get something that is more than the sum of its parts. A good illustration to really kind of nail home what I'm trying to say here, because it can be easy to take this in a way where it's like, well, nothing has changed. This seems to be a theory that doesn't really do anything different from other theories. It just sort of is a new way of looking at it. Part of the reason I've become so interested in quantum mechanics is because it seems to me that in my analysis, at least of the double slit experiment, and I'm not going to get into that here. You can watch my videos or others' videos. Watch my videos because I am very frustrated with how it is talked about in other videos. And I'll see if I can find some other videos besides my own, just so you know, and I'm not just making it up. But there is like just straight up misinformation. Didn't Neil deGrasse Tyson make a video where
he straight up lied? Yeah,
Yeah.
I watched one of those. What was he lying about? He was like,
he was lying about when you like check it with the detector.
When you look at it,
it changes what it's doing.
Yeah, it was that the particles act like little bullets rather than waves when you look at them.
Right.
And then you get these two bars, which is an interpretation.
Yes, that is
not actually what
that is not what you actually get. Even when you have the single slit, you'll still have a kind of diffraction pattern that matches what waves would do. So it's not that they're particles at one point and waves at another, it's that they are particle waves, and they are particles behaving like waves. The way I like to think of it, and I need to do more work to make sure that I can establish this, but it seems intuitive to me to have a kind of pilot wave theory, in the sense of you have individual particles, but those particles are behaving in an almost Aristotelian formal causal manner. They are guided by their form. They are participating in a higher whole, and the whole, this is the key part, the whole is not merely an emergent property. It is not accidental of the individual particles, just happen to move in this way. They are, because I accept the idea that there are not hidden variables, at least not local hidden variables. So there isn't a literal wave that is pushing the particles around. The particles, as it were, of their own accord, are creating these patterns, because the whole, in this way that we're not used to in current science, the whole would be effectively influencing the particles to behave this way. Because we normally think of this in terms of part up causation. We assume the bottom floor is the atoms, and that's where all the energy is, and the atoms behave in such a way, and it generates everything else just sort of by accident. You can draw parallels with Darwinism, and we should probably get into that, because I don't want people
Darwinism?
Yeah.
I'm a young Earth creationist.
Oh, are you?
No.
Okay, I was like, Dr. Carson will be very upset with me. I mean, he does not like young Earth.
You're hanging out with young Earth creationists?
Yeah.
He's taking you to Latin masses where they poo-poo Pope Francis? You gotta get rid of this friend, buddy.
No, not gonna happen, Dr. Carson. So sorry.
No, I do have young Earth creationist friends, though.
Yeah. No, I'm well, this is getting off track. Let me finish what I was saying. But it's people generally talk about it reductionistic. It's parts to whole up. So wholes, other than the atoms, are just concatenations of atoms. It's really just Democritus, from ancient Athens. It hasn't really progressed in its essence from that. What we're kind of trying to do, I think we align on this for sure, is it's a more Platonic Aristotelian view, where I think you can have both. I think it's sort of this unity going on that I do need to do a little more thinking to figure out precisely how that works. But the important thing is you can go the other direction. You can have whole to part causation, where the whole causes the parts to arrange themselves in a way, so that that's where you get some of the spooky stuff that I think you see in quantum mechanics, at least with the double slit experiment. So that's sort of at least a thought experiment to show you what it is. It would be like, it's kind of like the Rupert Sheldrake video, which I won't. I don't know enough about that. Where he's talking about fields, I don't know if you wanted to.
Oh yeah. Rupert Sheldrake has this idea that the way in which fields act on substances is analogous, at least, to the way that formal causes work on substances in Aristotle. So the way in which you throw some magnets down, and they, by kind of their own accord, seem to form this line, that is analogous to the way that, like, a shape is the form of a substance. Yeah. And to add to that, I mean, the way where the criticism I would foresee I haven't delved super far into this, but to Sheldrake's idea, because I do know that he is not well liked in the academic community, and I don't know enough about that to comment on that. But I will say that what I assume would be the main issue there is that the way that mathematically and fields are understood is, in some sense, they're understood atomistically. They're understood in the sense of every point in space, right, has a vector associated with it. Yeah. And the simplest way of understanding that is it's a vector representing, like, something that would move.
Yeah, when something is in there, how is it going to be pushed in a certain direction, if you will? So it's kind of acting almost like maybe I shouldn't say it's acting like a pilot wave, because I feel like that's...
I think
that's what is in my head.
It is a higher level thing, which is kind of
that's how it works.
Pushing the particles.
Yes, that's certainly how it works classically. Is it's like a pilot wave. It's this field that is moving things. When you get into quantum mechanics, they get annoyed when you say that, because it's like, no, it's fields of possibilities, vectors of possibilities, but that's kind of a whole different thing.
Okay.
I just shot that from the hip.
Okay,
So I
cool.
don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's a scary
Or I
rabbit
might
hole.
say something more stupid than usual. I shouldn't say that's insulting my viewership to imply I say stupid things.
Yeah.
I am a frickin' genius,
He's very
and
smart.
you guys are geniuses.
Lucky to have him.
Yeah, that's right. You guys are geniuses by proxy because you listen to me. That's right. But yeah, anyway. So,
Yeah, and then our recent conversations have kind of centered around. I was looking at your master's thesis,
yeah,
and that sparked something for me with regard to the pilot wave
yeah,
idea. I think my kind of understanding of the double slit experiment is slightly different,
yeah.
whereas you kind of favor.
Oh, this is a good thing to get into.
Yeah.
This is the particles versus waves,
Right.
Or fields,
Right.
Yeah.
As I understand the pilot wave theory, it's like they are particles,
Yes.
but they are kind of obeying a law.
Yes.
So
The simplest way of it, I mean, I think some people argue that it is very materialistic. It's a particle, and then there's like a kind of wave, but
yeah,
in some sense they don't really posit it. I might be being too materialistic about that because the way they talk
Okay.
about it, there's a particle, but it has a guiding equation for it that you can think of as though it's riding on a wave, but physicists are not very clear in their actual how materialistic they actually are because of the field theory.
right,
Um,
right, where everything is fields
Yeah.
because they are all NTPs and they want everything to be one substance, so, one kind of thing.
Very predominantly NTP and NTJs. The NTJs
NTJs.
like it because they get to, because it's a handy tool for them to.
I see.
It's one tool they can use to do all these cool things, So
Right,
it
right.
simplifies the grunt work. But now I think they are starting to really butt heads more than usual because I think the NTPs. This is my take. I maybe this doesn't actually generalize, but my assumption would be that the NTPs are really into more of the math and are more
Yeah.
into we want fields, we want things to be elegant, we want one principle, we want everything to unite, and the NTJs are like, but this is holding us back from doing more physics. I suspect, I don't know for sure, I think you can make an argument for Sabine Hassenfelder if you know of her. I think I pronounced that right. Sabina, I think it's Sabina, not Sabine.
Oh, it's Sabina. Okay.
I can't remember. I look like a fool now. I will check it, but it's the chick who's been doing, the German chick, who's been doing great for the most part videos. Not that I'm really in a position to judge whether they're great or not, as I'm not a professional physicist or anything. But I suspect she's NTJ. It's just a hunch, but I don't know. You can fight me in the comments about that. I don't have a super well put together argument.
Yeah. I'm thinking of one of her videos where she's like, "Why are you trying to make it one thing?"
Yeah.
It's
Yes,
just,
it's like we have to. That was
you're
the
just
main
bothered
reason.
by the aesthetics of it.
Yes,
you NTPs.
she wrote a book called Lost in Math.
Oh, okay.
So she, and she's really against like the CERN stuff that CERN is doing.
Really?
Yeah, just the idea of building bigger and bigger particle colliders to try to make the theory work. She's like,
Okay.
well, we already have our disconfirmation. This isn't working.
Right.
So, let's move on.
Yeah.
But that was my sense of it anyway. But that was an interruption to
The wave.
you had
The
a
wavy
very interesting idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, which was very striking. I'm still mulling it over. So explain it for the audience.
So I was looking at Michael's master's thesis and
Admiring it.
admiring its beauty,
Looking on.
its great daring, its elegance, and I actually couldn't figure out. I couldn't figure out what you were bothered by at first. I now understand that is the anti-realism stuff.
Yes. Yes.
Which I also think is ridiculous.
Yes.
But I was looking at the way in which the single photon interference stuff works. I was like, what if so I guess what I wanted to do was show the way in which that experiment is coherent with kind of everything that we experience, but it's just at like a kind of there's a quantitative difference between
Okay.
that and normal reality. So I was thinking like, okay, normal reality has these substances which are shapes, and these shapes constrain these possibilities for like pinball interactions where it's like two things touch and there's this linear kind of like you go this way, I go this way kind of thing. And so I was thinking, okay, if that's how normal reality works, what if the single photon interference thing is just that at a much lower energy level, essentially, such that the shape of the thing is maintained, but the possibility that it constrains is so low that it can only happen at one place. So it would be like if you had a key that would open a door. The key has the shape, and that shape constrains the possibility for those kinds of pinball interactions, that kind of touch interactions happening in all these different places. But if you just turn the energy down on that key, then you put it in the door, and it only touches one of the pins that it needs to move. So I was like, that seems to be...
So you'd almost need like multiple keys.
Yeah.
Put these multiple... Just to let me make sure I'm understanding, because I've often struggled understanding this because it's very. But so the first thing is, if I'm understanding correctly, what's central here is that there's this what would be the right word? Incongruence, a fundamental incongruence between the complexity of. I mean, complexity isn't the right word because that implies it's parts, and that's not the point. The shapes are wholes, but there's like because they're wholes, there's sort of this infinite nature to them. And so on our level, because of the, we don't notice the weirdness of the pinball interaction. So if I touch you, pinball interaction.
It feels like hole to hole.
It feels like hole to hole because there's so many pinballs, atoms, or things bouncing off each other with the electromagnetic fields. But as you go down and down and down, the shapes... I believe you're saying retain, because they're holes, they can infinitely retain their fullness or complexity, but the ability for them to interact with each other is reduced to just like one pinball interaction per shape. Which is the little number? Blip on the screen or the Planck's constant.
Which is kind of the
it's this limit.
The energy exchange currency, the lowest form of currency.
The lowest form of currency. You can't go below it, and you can't have halves, or you have to have whole multiples of it, if I'm understanding it correctly, because that's how it was explained to me. So it's their fault if I'm wrong. But
which would make the photon, in my view, is really, and this is kind of the bridge into the other metaphysics stuff. It's like the photon is the shape. Like the photon is not the potential for. I mean that I don't want to be too like platonic, but like the thing that makes you recognize a tree as a tree is more the shape than the matter.
Right.
Like you see a tree made out of coal, and you're like, oh, it's a coal tree.
Right.
You see a pile of sticks and leaves, you say. It's a pile of sticks and leaves. It's not. Oh, that's a tree disassembled. So yeah, this leads to a metaphysics in which the shape is the more real thing. Right.
And so and so the key analogy, you end up for each particle, which the particle is simply the result of the energy interaction between the shape of the key and other things. It can only interact in one place.
Yeah.
And so you effectively, what I'm imagining is it's almost like a ghost key, at least from a certain perspective, but it's real at one little point. Now, does that point, I don't know if we resolved this, does that point change? Or...
I mean, that's how it works with the quantum, is that it's like you don't know there is that arbitrary kind of collapse into like, okay, where in the shape does this thing happen?
Right.
And it seems where it happens seems to be related to the shape, though, because it does seem to happen more in the focal point and less at the
That's
sides.
perfectly clear.
So there is kind of like there's like some kind of lottery wheel
Right.
spinning within the shape that then determines
Yeah.
when that interaction happens.
And I remember when we were first talking about this, there's an important similarity, and people have been noting this, by the way, not with this, but some people have been arguing that pilot wave theory is actually saying the same thing essentially as the many worlds interpretation, which I still don't fully understand that. It's very mathematical, but in this case, I could understand certainly the similarities, because the way many worlds is usually described is off-putting to me. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Because it's described in like Rick and Morty logic,
Yeah.
where it's like, oh, there's an infinite number of universes, like the entire universe.
It's ENFP world.
Yeah. Yes.
Anything is possible.
It copies every time, I guess, in the lottery happens, every time there's this interaction event or something, and it just, so there's just this infinite number of universes. But the way I prefer to think of it now, which is not informed by the mathematics, so it may, not quite pan out exactly, but in my mind, I feel like the essence of it is actually more of like, it's like a cross section. Like you have infinite universes, or some number of universes even, where the wave function, that you stack them all together and the wave function is a complete continuous whole, but then we only have access to one slice, right? And so it's similar-ish to what you're describing in my head, where you have, because I was imagining like all these ghost keys that in order to open the lock, you have to shove in like infinite ghost keys in order to approximate the actual shape probabilistically, if that makes sense.
Yep,
So you need a lot of but the shape, because what you're saying is that it's so interesting, because it is very pilot wavy too,
right?
Because it's sort of combining a pilot wavy thing with this more platonic thing, where it's interesting. The key problem, it's not necessarily a problem, but you still have that. Okay, what is the mechanism that makes it random, or which? Let's transition into that really briefly, because I'm still this is still in a hypothesis stage. I'd like to make a video about it as I think about it, but I said earlier that I am okay with there not being hidden variables. I do believe that like the shape idea would, because pilot wave theory is a hidden variable theory.
Position essentially is the hidden variable.
The hidden variable would be the wave. The hidden variable being whatever the shape of the wave is determining where it moving the particle. It's something other than just probability as this concept at the bottom of the universe.
Can I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
Yes.
So in the pilot wave theory, though, the position of the particle is determined, but it is not known until. So the particle is in a particular place.
Yes.
Okay.
As I understand it, the
the
particle always has a definite position in time at every point.
Yeah.
But there's obviously an epistemological. So you could, if we got the right kind of technology or whatever, we could perhaps determine where the particle is at any given point in time, because it has a position, but it's just a question of, okay, is that feasible or possible? Which is a different question from orthodox quantum theory, where they say it is in principle impossible. Yeah. Which I expressed some frustrations with that, along with some other physicists in my MA thesis. So did that answer the question?
Yep.
Yeah. So the hidden variable in any of these theories would be there's something that is, it's the idea of does that, the principal question is, does that point where it is real, does that point where it is real, or I shouldn't say real per se, but that it is actual, that spec that actually shows up on the screen, is that thing's position purely probabilistic, or is it the result of some sort of an underlying variable? Does it happen the moment that it makes the interaction? In other words, does this still have the measurement problem built into it, or not? Measurement problem, because some people say it's not a problem. Okay. But the idea of the moment that a measurement happens, however you want to define measurement, you could say it's just interaction. You could just say anytime it interacts with anything else. Then it snaps into place where that particular part of the key will be. if that makes sense.
I think so.
Yeah. So if that is probabilistic, if it's not like a little spot on the shape that is moving around,
Right.
you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Is it that, or is it the moment that you put it into the door, then a spot appears to correspond, or appears in order for it to interact with the door?
You're asking me in my.
I am asking your
yeah,
opinion.
yeah. No.
I think the second option is closer to what you had in mind originally.
Where it's
the interaction that it happens probabilistically, because the shape is the more real thing.
Yeah.
In some sense.
I mean, if it is the first thing, if it is kind of a thing that is moving around in the thing, then it's kind of like splitting hairs between the pilot wave theory and the just like it is a wave thing.
Right.
It just gives privilege to the shape
Yeah.
side of it, and I mean, I don't really like. I feel Einstein's sympathy of God does not play dice in that situation, but I want to say that it's probabilistic just because it maintains the shapiness is the real thing.
Right.
So that's what I would go with, but I don't know how committed I would be to that. So
I go back and forth. I think it's really interesting. I also, if at the very least it helped me, I think, understand at least a way of understanding many worlds much better, and why anyone would think it's really pilot wave theory in disguise, as some people have been arguing. But them many worlds theorists are getting very aggressive. They're maybe not aggressive, but they're getting very more and more people are coming to that camp.
Well, it's culturally very. It has a lot of cultural kind of weight to it. Like people really like it.
Yeah. There's some people have talked, and some people have talked. I'm not going to be able to put links for all these videos, but there's a video by, I can't remember his name, but he basically argued, he was saying some of the problems with it, and he said, so why is it so popular? Well, because people like maybe it's because people like the idea of, if there are infinite alternate universes, then if I'm sad in this universe, then maybe I'm happy in another one. Or if I make a mistake here, it didn't happen in another one. Or I can play around with, science fiction ideas of maybe I'm Batman in another universe or something.
Right.
Not to overly trivialize it. I'm not saying the head theorists that's what it is, but sort of culturally it seems to be an element of it.
There is something of like giving you a bit of a breath from the determinism of like the 17th or 18th century kind of determinism, where it's like all of the points, all of the information is contained in the very beginning, and it's like it's still deterministic, but it's like it's at least getting bigger.
Right.
It's like, okay, cool.
Gives you more options.
Because
I do think people feel very quite understandably stifled by the old, like, there is one function, which is what the pilot wave theory is effectively trying to do.
Oh,
right, because it's saying this thing has a point and it's moved around, and we just have to find the variables.
So my question though to the pilot wave theory is does that particle then have shape to it?
That is a good. I don't believe so. I think it is treated as just like a point. Yeah, it's a dimensionless point, which I don't really know how it then creates the mark on the screen. I am not a mathematician. I do not think mathematically at all.
Sure.
At least I don't think that I do.
Well, it's interesting because the dimensions of a thing are not really contained in a lot of the traditional physics stuff. It's mass, and like mass is not necessarily.
Yeah. You're right.
There's density. I guess density, but density is not really.
No,
that's for like
Yeah, you're right.
Balancing beakers and stuff.
You're right. Yeah, I need to talk with one of the professors at the university physics, because she had mentioned that there's apparently. I should have looked into this a lot sooner, because you'll like this. At least I think so. It depends on how it actually goes. But they were talking about how topology actually they're finding has real consequences in the quantum world. So it would be, that would be shape. Oh, I'm embarrassed. I hadn't thought of this before. This is right up exactly like the kind of thing you would be very interested in.
I like shapes.
Shape having an actual influence on things. Topology, to use the more. That apparently, like, the topology of particular substances, like, because you can have all the same atoms, but if the topology is different, then it can have different effects.
Cool.
Or something like that.
Cool.
Yeah. So
I like it.
I'll try to look more into that.
My two passions, typology and topology.
Topology, there you go.
Very nice.
I'm going to run by my little, just so you get my because I remember when we first talked about this, it was fascinating to me because at first I remember you sort of starting to explain it, and I was like, John, I'm going to be honest with you. This is an unusual time when I have no idea what you are talking about. It was not clicking for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it was because, for whatever reason, I just prefer naturally, I want there to be a thing. And I don't like fields and I don't like waves. I'm not saying it's not true. Me not liking something that has nothing to do with whether it's true.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying that it's funny to me that almost temperamentally, I just don't like waves or fields because they don't feel like things. They're too like amorphous and everybody's always talking about them. And I'm like, but there's a mark on the screen.
Yeah.
It's right there.
Yeah.
So where did that come from?
Yeah.
I don't care about your... Anyway, there's a lot of temperamental things there. But the way that I tend to think of it is I'm very big on... I'm big on not necessarily the probabilistic side, but the probability being a function or result of something like voluntary will or free will being a fundamental part of the universe. So I'm inclined to think the way I had originally formulated this, which will probably sound very kooky, but I like to think of the particles as being in some way or measure conscious, or at least being free agents in some way, almost like bacteria or something, I suppose you could say. And they are unpredictable in the same way bacteria are unpredictable, where you can't necessarily know where a particular bacteria is going to go. You only know what the constraints are on it, but the bacteria ultimately gets to choose. So the constraints on it are, the holes that are... Effectively, I was tying it in, I think I talked about this in one of my videos, I was tying it in with like Jung's collective unconscious, actually,
right.
with almost the notion of, it's a non-local pilot wave, was I think how I originally described it, right?
That is so interesting. That is just...
Like psychologically, like they're all linked up somehow via this non-local network that tells them, guides them without them even realizing it. So basically it's serendipity or synchronicity.
Yes.
Jung's synchronicity, his dreaded astrology is true idea, basically. It's kind of how it's... I loved a review someone gave for the Synchronicity book where he was writing it with Wolfgang Pauli, and they're like, well, the Pauli stuff was very interesting, but Jung is like banana cakes.
I don't know why
the specific word they use.
Banana cakes.
I was like, I can't, I understand the frustration.
Can I say something about that?
Yes, please do.
So the way in which I think about introversion is like continuity of a thing across time, mostly, sort of. I think that's good. And so the orientation towards the collective unconscious is how Jung talks about introversion. Not specifically the collective unconscious, but all of the subjective factor with all the baggage that has.
Right.
So effectively, that's what's happening in the single photon experiment, or in the double split experiment, is that you're generating this continuity across time by them all kind of having this orientation towards their one being. Right.
And in order to really see it, you have to eliminate all of these external factors that would mess it up, effectively.
Yes.
Because if, like in the Feynman thing where he talked about like, that's where the detector originally comes from, as I understand it, is Feynman is talking about how, well, if you do it with electrons and then you shine like a laser or some kind of light through the experiment, the light will deflect off of the electrons and you can tell where the electrons are. But if the light is of too high an intensity, in order for you to really pinpoint where the electrons are, the light has to be of a high enough intensity that... This is not literally correct. People get annoyed with me when I put it this way, but in my mind I'm just like, so the photon is smaller when it has more energy, and it's also like faster and higher energy, more momentum is the more technical way. And when it's so UV light and purple light is small and fast like a bullet, and it goes pew, and red light is like kind of a lazy sort of spread out, that I'm very scientific in my thinking, you see. And so anyway, the point being that the purple light comes in and you can tell exactly where it was, but it knocks the electron off course. This is how Feynman describes it, not necessarily how other people would describe it. So, and so that's why it messes up the interference pattern. You don't get the interference pattern anymore. It knocks them out of. The only reason I mentioned that was not to get into, because I talked about that in my thesis, and some people had some criticisms that I still haven't fully.
But don't you still get a kind of interference pattern?
Not that I'm aware of. I believe the whole point was that the interference pattern does sort of disappear, but it just kind of becomes blurry or something. I need to look more into that though.
It's not an interference pattern, but they are still moving as if they are waves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just. I'll double. Yeah, as far the reason they say it's as though they've become particles, presumably, is because
the interference
because the interference pattern isn't there anymore. But Feynman was arguing that is because, or Feynman was suggesting at least that might be simply because it's not, the light is not hitting every electron, it's only hitting some of the electrons. So if it knocks enough of those electrons off the path, then the interference pattern is no longer there because you got electrons landing where they normally shouldn't be landing statistically.
Got it.
So it sort of washes it out, I think is the term he uses.
Got it.
I'll link to the specific place where he talks about this just so you know where I'm getting this from, because it's kind of not how he's the only person where I found it, but I found it referenced in 2022 textbook or 2023 textbook where they'd said, I'm taking this from Feynman. Anyway, what were we talking about before I got to that?
I don't know.
Gosh,
the place I wanted to go from there, though, and how this...
the extroversion, introversion.
And more specifically, or not specifically, but more the intuition sensation thing.
Yeah.
Because the way I think about intuition and sensation now is that kind of potential for interactions with sensation and intuition being corresponding to the perception of shape.
Ah.
Yeah.
Right. You've talked a little bit with me about that.
Yeah. And so so okay, and then just to like, because what I originally wanted to do with my reply, with talking about the photon, like the wave thing, was to create this kind of like it's all one thing going from the quantum realm to reality. Was like, okay, the way in which, like I'm getting this from John Vervaeke, like the way in which a tree grows, the actual shape of the tree has an effect on the physical things, because the shape of the tree is constraining the interactions that it's having with other things in its environment. So if the photosynthesizing cells are at the top, they're gonna get the sunlight, and they're going to increase, and they're going to grow.
The macroscopic world has a direct causal effect on the micro, and vice versa, through this notion of shape in space.
Right. And so then from there, I'm like, okay, intuition is the perception of the shape. Sensation is kind of obvious, and the way in which sensation is happening in your eyes is like clearly like these interactions, like your eyes are getting hit by photons and stuff.
And depending on where your eye is and the shape of your eye and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then this goes to the other kind of like big thing, and this is more recent. This was not the 2020 insight, but like what I realized, like what I want to do with the Myers-Briggs stuff is make it so that the relationship, and this is another John Vervaeke line, but make it so that there is a clear relationship between your epistemology and your ontology.
Right.
Make it so that the way in which we talk about the mind corresponds to things in reality, instead of there being like this power for finding unity in the mind, but really reality is all just these independent bouncing around things, and like all of this like perception of form is epiphenomenal.
Right.
And it's like, no, things have shape has this causal thing, the mind has this capacity for seeing shape, like there's this coherence between our capacity for perception and the actual world. There's one more thing I wanted to say about that. Can't remember what. But
Intuition, sensation.
Intuition, sensation.
how do those interact in this? Because just to because the extroversion introversion thing, I was thinking a little bit about that lately. What I was getting to with the or what I was going off on rather is it's like internal factor versus external factor of what is influencing the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Mm-hmm.
introverted thing would be listening to this like inner the inner voice, the which in the theory would be like the guiding wave or the pilot wave or something here. The form, the shape, the destiny. Whereas there's these external forces as well that can exert an influence, and depending on which one it tends to turn towards. I'm not necessarily applying that to the quantum world. I'm just using that as a jumping off point. It obviously works very nicely in psychology, I think, because Jung's theory, that's what he's doing. He's saying that the human being has these internal drives, this internal history that goes through time, that links him back to his ancestors.
Right.
Excuse me, that gives him wisdom and direction in that direction, but then he also has external factors that are not necessarily linked up with that in the same way.
Which brings us to Darwin.
Oh, yes, it does bring us to Darwin. Let me say a few words on Darwin, just so that we're clear. I really like Darwin. I think I've said this to you before. I have a great fondness for Darwin, and I think that Darwin's great contribution is not, as many people have been saying, it is not that that there is no God, because that's how it is in many cases been said, is that, Darwin's great contribution is that he showed how we don't need intelligence to create the world. We can rely on accidental processes like natural selection being the main poster child, or sexual selection, or genetic drift, or these sorts of things. Accidental, non-intelligent, sort of emergent drives from the atoms just doing their thing.
Yeah.
On a much greater scale.
Yeah.
And that, in my mind, is not Darwin's great contribution. And I don't believe that's how Darwin really thought about it.
Okay.
I might be wrong about that. I need to read more Darwin, but my view is that the real contribution of Darwin is that he proved that the Earth was created, and it hasn't just existed. He didn't prove that, but he showed, here's how there is a way for animals to become other animals, for the matter to be created and organized, right? If you go, I've said this before to people, and I'm going to continue saying it because it just makes complete sense to me. If you read in Genesis, I'm doing this partly just to be provocative, because I'm like, there need not be all this animosity here. All the animosity is politically driven and has all this baggage. And if you go into Genesis and you read it, the story lines up, roughly speaking, with the scientific story. If you want, you can say, in the beginning there was light. You could say that's the Big Bang. But then you have, you start with the waters, and then the creation of the atmosphere sort of forms, and then you get, the most important part is that it specifically states that the seas teemed with life. Let the seas teem with life, many little creatures. So sea creatures are created first. And then birds are also created at the same time. That's a bit of a problem, but we'll ignore that for my theory.
Never mind. Go on.
Well, birds are kind of like the fish of the air. So I think that maybe that's where that's coming from.
I think of those as like a...
Well, it's a heaven and earth thing, obviously.
Yeah, and specifically with like ideas. Like he created the ideas, and then the two realms kind of like get joined in man.
No,
but
I'm trying to make a naturalistic.
Sorry.
Well, anyway, the point is that, listen, I know it's easy for me to laugh at this. It says teeming, therefore it's scientific. Obviously, that's not what I mean. I just mean that if you think about all of the different possibilities that you have open for describing the creation of the Earth, that is only one possibility that they happen to choose that happens to link up. The fact that they start with stuff teeming in the oceans, and then you get land animals, and only at the very end do you get humans. That's the story in Genesis, and that's the story Darwin tells. And there's no good reason why the religious story, why would the religious story tell it that way? Why didn't they start with human beings and then have human beings create all the animals, and that's why they get to rule over them, right? Why couldn't it be that giraffes came first?
It is really weird.
Yeah, isn't it weird?
It is weird when you're reading. You're like, oh, the animals are before us.
Yeah, the animals come before,
Yeah.
you have this natural progression. You start with water animals in the water, and then they come up onto the land, and then they, because we come out of the water, we come out of the womb of the mother, we come out of baptism. If we want to, I can go very far with this if I want to, in terms of just linking it up with Christianity. So I have no problem with any of that.
Yeah.
I have the problems I run into is with just the mechanisms of how that transformation occurs. I have no problem with the transformation. I think it's kind of beautiful, and I have no problem with any of a tremendous amount of evidence that's been laid forward about the physiology of humans and being able to understand that in an evolutionary way of you can. Where I have problems is with the just so stories, as they say, where people and that there's plenty of people who have problems with those. So I'm in good company, because it's just too easy to be able to say, to basically tell your own creation stories out of the blue and just say, you see, when in the past, when we were in tribes, we were all, we didn't have to worry about this or that, and so we, and we had tails, and because of this, we now like butts or something.
It's completely unfalsifiable.
It's completely unfalsifiable and all this stuff, but it fills that storytelling niche, So I have problems with that. Is when I agree with the story and find it nice, then it's brilliant, of course. But when I don't like the story, then it's foolish and.
Well, the way the story ends up going is in this really Gnostic way, because they end up saying, like, we've evolved these very violent tendencies from our relationship to matter, but now that we've got the cheat code of consciousness is going to break us out of our relationship to matter, and we are going to free ourselves from the evil matter that has made us racist.
We can
and
we can escape the matrix.
Yeah, and we can escape the matrix.
The race. That joke did not land.
The race.
That joke crashed. So I mean that I kind of took over there at the beginning, but it links in with the quantum stuff, because I'm like, okay, because I'm not satisfied with. I don't have a problem with natural selection. Obviously, that's the brilliance of Darwin's theory, is that this has to be part of it. Mm-hmm. The way Darwin lays it out in Origin of Species, in my mind, is he starts by talking about artificial selection, right? Breeding, and how, look, we can breed animals and give them different traits, so it's on the smaller scale, and then he says, well, what if there's natural selection, which if you look at it from kind of I don't necessarily agree with this, but if you look at it from a theistic point of view, when he says natural selection, he just means God selection. Now, people are probably annoyed with me for saying that, because it's like, if you understand it as a theistic point of view where he's equating God and nature, then there's no reason you can't read it that way.
Right.
And I remember when I noticed that, I was like, he's drawing this distinction between the two. But people don't talk about the artificial selection as being kind of one of the things that he used as a basis to show, hey, this isn't that crazy. And obviously natural selection exists. The problem that I just continually have is I'm just like, I'm sorry guys, but the woodpecker's skull, like, that is able to withstand that, I cannot understand or believe. It's not even that I can't understand, it's just I cannot believe that arises purely through natural selection or sexual selection. Every time people talk about it, it feels like they are telling me I need to accept a creed of faith. It's you can be annoyed with me for saying this, but it really is like my scientific side saying, I can't, that doesn't make sense. This feels like I have to take this on faith, like, because I can't see how that can occur, and we can't test it. We'd have to look and see, like, every intermediary form and show how, because in order to because the woodpecker can't originally do that, presumably. So what mechanism caused it to have a harder skull over time. If you have something, however, that's more like a wave function, like a guiding pilot wave, a shape or a destiny or a telos or something that is able to screen out the vast number of possibilities, of which there are many, 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 which is something that I don't feel like people are talking enough about. There are mathematical issues here.
It's insane.
Yeah, the probabilities are insane.
Yeah.
And you can always fall back on, of course they're insane. That's why we're probably the only life in the universe or something like that. And it's like, yeah, but
it happens so many, just on Earth it happens so many times that there's so many different species.
Just kept happening again.
Kept on getting it right. Yeah.
It just
they had
kept getting it right.
1 in a trillion shot that they got right just again and again and
every
again.
single time, in order to create, something more. Oh, hummingbird. See, look at that hummingbird. Well, you can't see the hummingbird, but see, look at it. Look at its wings flapping.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's insane, and it's beautiful, and it's cute, and I want to snuggle it.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But yeah, I really struggle with that. But if you the moment you introduce something like teleology into it, boom, I'm A-okay with it. I'm like, great. So yeah, we're there's also my Nietzsche coming out, because I'm like, well, Nietzsche would say, no, there is not a teleology. We create the teleology, and that's where one of the places we definitely depart. But yeah, if you have some kind of a guiding something, like whatever's going on with the quantum realm, where it's like there's a form of humanity that was, struggling to make itself felt, partly probabilistically, through these random hits, but it is guided so that you don't have to worry about just pure chaos. Right. I've been talking for a while, so I don't know if you have anything.
The two things that come to mind are that it's the evolution thing is the same kind of argument that they make about reducing human behavior to these interactions of parts. It's like, well, obviously, in principle, if we had enough time and a strong enough computer, we could show that this is the case. But you'll just have to trust us on this one, that you're ultimately just a bunch of parts bopping around, and then the evolution thing is that same argument. And then so this now, how the actual telos enters into the picture in evolution brings us to like one of the things that I think is really exciting, which is like mind as like a fifth fundamental force.
Yes,
it's like the way in which mind would act on matter is the same way in which these other forces would act on matter. It's like mind is not like, and I don't mean to scapegoat Descartes, but it's not touching at the pineal gland. It's not another realm that at the pineal gland types in its instructions. It is kind of this whole which kind of says, okay, like these things are going to move together now. It's like we're going to constrain the directions of these things on kind of like a
cooperate with the other forces.
It doesn't look like pinball interactions. It looks like things happening together, which is why it's harder to see, because it's not happening at one place. It's not this discrete thing. And then this also brings me to the feeling function. Because I feel like the feeling function has to do with these these kinds of interactions which are not reducible to like these crystalline lines that you can draw. It's like, well, it has this effect here and here and here. It's like, no, this is having an effect on the whole. Every single part is affecting the whole, and the whole is then drawing them together. So the way in which you have two keys play it on a piano, it's like they're not touching each other, not like booping each other and making, that's not what's producing the harmony, which is the whole.
Right.
Yeah, that's a lot of leaping, but
no.
I'm trying to prove that I'm ENTP. I'm not INTP.
It's okay.
So,
well, I don't. I was I was just going to say, someone once typed me as ESTP. They argued I was an
ESTP?
ESTP, which I was like, well, there's a
Yeah.
part of me that's sort of flattered, oddly,
Yeah.
by saying I'm my dual type, according to socionics, but
Right.
I'm sorry, it was just not so. But I wanted to say something, because I remember during my master's degree, one of the first essays that I wrote was for... it was for a class that was called Phenomenology, and I think what happened was because phenomenology is a continental philosophy. It's Husserl, and it's tied in with like philosophy of mind, obviously, but it has a very continental side to it. Heidegger is associated with it, who's like the most continental philosopher ever.
Yeah.
But I suspect it might have been that they had phenomenology on the books, and they're like, well, we need to teach phenomenology, but there had been some, because of COVID, everybody's been struggling, and so they'd also unfortunately had some people pass away, and so they were kind of in a tough spot, and so they were like, well, we have one of our professors is very well respected in cognitive science. That's kind of like phenomenology. Can you teach it? And he's like, well,
Wow.
yeah, and so I think that's kind of what happened. So it's like, well, we're going to call it phenomenology, but he's like, yeah,
Man.
And I think listen, I feel like I gave him flack in my head, way more flack than he deserved in my head at the beginning, because I was very annoyed because his way of doing philosophy is very different from how I think it should be done, and he's very, very like science, and it's not the science that's the problem. It'd take too long for me to explain. The point is I'm only bringing that up because it adds a funny element too. I'm writing a paper that is of the form that I'm about to tell you in the class of someone who's basically teaching a cognitive science class, and is never stating it, but taking it completely for granted.
Yeah, that is the way of seeing the world.
Yeah. That is like, we're not going to talk about metaphysics or the soul or anything here, because like you can't quantify that. What are you talking about? He was a fan of Dennett and Dawkins and
that fraud.
Yes, God rest his soul.
Oh, he's dead?
Oh, you hadn't heard that?
Dang.
He passed away a little bit ago.
God rest his soul.
Yeah. I was like, ooh, dang, John.
Sorry.
Speaking ill of the dead.
Sorry.
It's okay. I got you to say that because I would call him a hack fraud to you in private before he died.
Oh, really?
Yeah, do you not remember? I've said that to other people. I feel kind of bad about it. I shouldn't talk that way about my passed away, my colleague, yes, to show how I value myself. Well, but I really did not like his ideas. So
I can talk ill of him because he's also ENTP.
There we go.
I'm really railing against my own tendencies towards reductionism, and
yes,
that's what's going on.
Yes. Well, you're returning back to another time when ENTPs didn't have to be reductionistic.
Yeah.
They reduced to a different thing.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get back to the medieval ENTP.
Yeah. There's still no free will.
There's still no free will.
But
see, that's definitely where we differ there.
Yeah.
We're joking here partly, but it's like it's fundamental in my mind. That's where I totally agree with Bohr.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, I know you were trying to open up the realm for free will, buddy. I know that's exactly what you were doing. I know that's what you were doing. That's why you're doing that. What was I gonna? Oh, the essay that I wrote for this class was I was arguing. I'm gonna see if I can repeat the argument here because it's a bit technical, but I was saying, okay, if materialistic reductionism, I can't remember the specific term I decided to use, but I was trying to use terminology that's already in the field.
Yeah.
But materialistic reductionism would say, or atomistic reductionism, I think is what I said. Atomistic reductionism would hold that everything is reducible to atoms, so that atoms are the only thing that exists. Everything else is an illusion or an emergent property or whatever you want to call it, but it's just the atoms are the thing that is actually real. And then I said consciousness, and not even just consciousness itself, but the fact that the unity of experience. I use the example of vertigo. Like if I'm standing on the edge of a cliff and I'm looking down, you can pull vertigo apart into different sensations, but you also have the wholeness that is specifically vertigo. Feeling nauseous is not vertigo, but feeling nauseous and also the urge to jump and also dizziness and all these things put together, that's vertigo. And in order to have that, these experiences have to converge at, in some sense, one point. And there has to be, the way I explained it in the paper is that if there is an experience, then there must be an experiencer. There must be a subject of that experience. This is, and I tried, I did some work to try to show how it doesn't make sense. You're literally not able to talk about experiences without there being subject of experience. It doesn't work. You run into absurdities if you don't do that. So, I then went on to say, well, I am made up of atoms, and if I am made up of atoms and yet I am having, so you could argue, right, that I am this one little secret atom that is like a parasite in my brain and is pulling all the strings. You could technically argue, William James at one point sort of brought that up as a pod, because William James is great. He thought of everything, and he brought that up and said, he didn't really argue against it, he just said, this just is, I don't like this.
It's fun.
It's interesting, but I'm not, I feel like we can all agree we don't want to go with this. But I didn't say that specifically about but this is what I had in mind, is that you could technically be like a little atom, maybe, that's connected. And that's kind of how we talk about the brain, really, is that it's the brain is connected to everything else. And I'm like, but your experience, as we had talked about in the class, seems to be this bodily thing. It's not localized in the brain in that way. So you have to be able to unite all of these different sense modalities in order to create a whole experience, like with the piano keys. You get a sound over here, a sound over here. It's different from both the sounds coming this way. So I was saying, okay, so there would seem to be this unity of my body in order to produce this one subject of experience. Therefore, I, as my body, am a unity in that sense via consciousness. Therefore, there's at least one thing in the universe that is not an atom. Therefore, materialistic reductionism is false. That was sort of the idea of my argument. I feel like I probably could have done it better. I was under pressure, and he did not like it.
R.I.P.
Yeah, he did not like it. I got an A minus in that class.
Oh, dang.
Everybody else got an A, as far as I found out. So
dang.
I don't know. I like to play it up as though I'm the persecuted intellectual, and I'm pretty sure that's kind of what was going on. But yeah, whatever. It's small fry. I don't even know for sure if that's really what was going on. But
I feel like this way of talking about the feeling function unites your definition and motes and beams with my kind of more like geometric kind of understanding of it.
How so?
Which is that because your definition of motes and beams is that there's an interiority to the experience.
Yes.
And so when two experiences come into a unity, that unity itself is the interiority.
Right.
And it's not a unity which is separate from the things itself.
Right.
As it is with the thinking function. The thinking function creates a unity which is like a higher level category. It's like dog, cat, higher unity is animal. But the feeling function is dog, cat, like, oh, I'm petting dogs and cats at the same time.
I see.
It's not abstracted, it's interior.
Right.
And it's just a difference in how the unity is created between two different substances.
Right. Okay, wait, so this might mess that up a little bit.
Oh, okay.
We'll see.
Okay.
And we'll see if this is what you think, because this might be a little bit different from what you're talking about, but I just had the sudden flash, and I think we've talked about this, of rather than the individual functions, the function axes, where you have TEFI would be almost like tending to split things up, because like going down like the ladder, as it were, in the sense of, the way you described it, of like the feeling being more interior. This is why it might mess it up a bit, because I'm linking it up more with introverted feeling, but the image I had in my mind is, oh, TE does seem to like prefer differentiating things more than it likes to link things together.
Yeah.
And so it differentiates things from this particular perspective of, well, this thing is different from this thing. And it links up with introverted feeling, where each of those things has its own interior, but then you can kind of combine those things together, not to get this higher unity and go up the chain, but to create something new lower in the chain. This is a half-formed thought. I was comparing it with TIFE, where there's this move towards this more generalized unity, where you have this thing and this thing are in the same category.
Yeah.
I feel like there's more work that needs to be done there, but
the way in which I still think that universal categories are still in the domain of extroverted thinking.
Okay.
I think the animal, cat, dog, that basic very categorical pyramid is still part of extroverted thinking, but they do emphasize, it's like, okay, there are still more qualities here that are like, and the key for my understanding of the thinking function is that linearity. It's like that the pyramid is linear. It's like animal, cat, dog, and then thinking at the level of cat and dog is measuring in this linear sense, like how big are your paws, how big are your ears. That's where the differentiation comes
in order to build their pyramid, they're more likely to kind of start from the ground and build up, as it were, or emphasize that, whereas the TI is more likely to want to kind of build down, to say, I understand this category, and then get frustrated when it doesn't, when the facts start, the exceptions pile up so much that it's like, I gotta create a new system now. And the TE type gets can get lost, and this is very Jungian how he describes it, get lost, and they're never able to construct categories, or their categories are too general so that they're not as useful or something like that.
Yes. And so that TE is measuring down here between the cats and dogs. And then FI is doing the emergent tone of cat and dog together.
Okay.
And then on the FE side of things, where we have like the emphasis on animal as like the uniting idea. Right. That's the linear kind of aspect. The emphasis of FE is like, are you guys playing together well? Like, you guys actually making music together, or is the music just like an abstraction that I'm making as an FI type?
Oh, interesting. Right. So the FI, because I'm still trying to quite grasp that. So it would be almost like the interiority created by having these two things together.
Yeah, in my experience. Yeah.
Catness feels like this. Dogness feels like, maybe I shouldn't say catness and dogness. But this cat feels like this, or this dog. I guess it depends on the type. But then cat and dog together feel like this.
It's that scene in Ratatouille. Where he's like, you put the cheese in your mouth, one tone.
Right.
You put the strawberry in your mouth, one tone.
Where you put them both, and it becomes this unity.
It's jazz.
It's something new.
Yeah.
It's like jazz.
It's like jazz.
Okay. And then, whereas with FE, it's
and again, like you still have the overlap thing.
Right.
You
have the
same
overlap
kind of overlap.
going, but
so it's also doing that, but the emphasis is on.
Yes, they are more separate.
Whoa.
I feel like. Oh, you all right?
Yes, my dad scared me.
Yes, his father is walking up.
Hello.
Oh. I was gonna say something. So for the FE, it would be like, because I'm imagining like the pyramid still, but in the sense of like, the cat and dog. I'm going to leave out cat and dog. Black man and white man are both man, so they should get along, right? Is that kind of more what we're... So there's still kind of the separation of, well, they're two different entities, obviously, but I want this external unity because they both participate in this higher category or something.
And there's kind of an emphasis in like, how are they actually interacting with each other?
Right.
Like, what is the interaction like? Is it...
Right.
Because the FI seems to be like, it's still an abstraction, like that's how Jung talks about introversion in general. Like, it's abstracting from, it's like the FI type writes a poem about racial harmony. The FE type says, do you guys know each other? Like, can I introduce you to each other?
Right.
So yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So this then gets to, like this is why I find the metaphysics and the typology stuff so exciting. It's like that difference with the abstraction is no longer just in the head. That is a real thing. Like
Right.
things do actually stack up into unities. It's not just represented as an abstraction.
Right.
It's not just a head thing.
Right.
Even though it does have to do with receding from the actual interactions.
Right. That was one of the. And let me just check the. Sorry, everybody, you're seeing my big finger. Oh, we've got plenty of battery.
Nice.
That was one of the big things in that I realized when I realized what you were doing. Actually, when we were not first talking, but really starting to rev up talking in 2020, because that notion of like the way I originally conceptualized it is, he's like doing this extroverted thing, but it's more than that. You're extroverted in the sense of like, he's trying to take it out of the head,
Right. Yeah.
But which is technically what you're doing, but
Right.
it's bigger than that because you're trying to show that this is not just a psychological theory. This can be used as a metaphysical theory, effectively.
Right. Essentially, because my training, I don't really have professional philosophical. No, I don't have like classical philosophical training. I like started with the Myers-Briggs.
Right.
Listened to Peugeot, realized that there was deep consonance there, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at this!
Right.
Look at this deep consonance, and then I realized, this is just metaphysics.
Right.
Right. And then, part of the reason that I think you thought it was an extroverted bias at first was that I still didn't understand what I was doing with it at first. So I was like, when I was...
You're emphasizing this is all in someone's head and this is all technically subjective, but I'm trying to show that it applies to objects outside as well.
So what I did was like, I was like, introversion doesn't have anything to do with subjectivity.
Right.
That is, it has to do with
right.
unity. That's what it is. So I
Right,
essentially got rid of subjectivity and was like, but it's like, no. What I really need to do is just show that like the relationship between subjectivity and like extension in the world is the same relationship that like objects have, like with their identities and their existence in the world.
Right. That this extroversion introversion relationship. Extroversion, introversion, and the way Jung described it is a special case of a more general principle.
Right, but both are happening. I'll leave it there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very NTP of you, very Einsteinian of you to say, I will take this is Newton is a special case of a more general theory.
Yes.
Because when you understand which I don't fully understand it, obviously, it's very complicated, but relativity. The purest abstraction of it is, the laws of physics apply in every reference frame. Universally. They apply in universal reference frames. Mm-hmm. And if you understand what he means by that, then everything else apparently follows. But I don't understand the math well enough to see that. But we won't get into that. I often go through the phase of, we're kind of in shadow now. Where this is very... Sorry, I'm like very fussy with the quality of the video and everything, but I was just going to say that I often go through phases of when I'm first learning about some of these physics theories, I'm like, I don't think that's true, and I'll learn a lot more about the theory that way because I'll be trying to disprove it, and then usually I'll be like, okay, now I see what they're doing, but so. That is in preface to, I'm not sure Einstein was right.
Oh, okay.
which means I need to learn more about Einstein, but I have to approach it in that sort of a way because it just engages me much more. I can tempt myself with, it's like I tempt myself with the carrot of being the next Einstein.
Right.
I'm able to lead myself along. This is how I motivate myself.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I just get motivation talking to you. Just like, what's Michael thinking about? What's he going? What's he doing?
Very, very helpful. I'll just be in rooms with like whiteboards on campus and talking with John and just scribbling on the whiteboard as I try to. I think you do that too, actually.
Oh yeah. I can't really. When we're on a call, I'm always doing something with my hands as well. I can't just like do that.
Yeah.
I need to engage.
Yeah. Well.
Is that a good place to stop?
I think so.
It was good.
Was there anything else we wanted to talk about? Here? I think this is pretty good.
Yeah, I think that was pretty coherent.
Yes, I think so.
think
What do
everything
you guys think? Let us know in the comments below.
Yeah. There's 26,000 of you not subscribed to me, so what's going on?
Just the fact you know the numbers.
Yes.
Just a few more points of order is that while I've been here, this is perfect, is that while I cannot beat you in chess or Scrabble or Othello, I do have 26,000 more subscribers, so
Very
take
true.
that.
Very true. Yeah. Yeah. Hurts me.
It has been, just for the record, this has been very, very pleasant. I'm very happy I was able to come here and we could do this.
Cool.
So I hope we're able to share that excitement with you, and you can look forward, hopefully, to us talking more about this in the future, either just in our own videos or together on other calls or something like that. We'll see how it goes. But cool. It's been 10 years. I just had, no, I won't do that joke on screen.
Nice.
I was going to be like, it's been 10 years and that's been long enough. Like,
pull a ring.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, no, pull a gun. I was going much darker. That's why I didn't want to say it, but now I've revealed. Clearly, we have very different Freudian slips going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm the romantic.
Yeah. Anyway, on that lovely note.
I was gonna say, I realize that we're living in ENFP world. Is really what we're living in, and it sucks.
You mean like socially,
metaphysically? Yeah, I feel like evolution is a very Empedocles came up with that.
This is true.
He's ENFP, and then the whole quantum realm stuff.
Yes.
And then the whole Satanism, that's very ENFP. You know.
The Satanism.
The upside down triangle, or upside down pentagram. We didn't talk about the numbers thing.
We did not talk. You know what? We should probably talk about the numbers thing, so that they're like, what on earth are they talking about? Do we want to talk about the numbers thing?
Yeah, just real quick.
Yeah,
we had a funny coincidence of each inventing calculus separately, where I was thinking about numbers that corresponded with the quadras, and I think it was one corresponds with. One and four both kind of, I made kind of the same thing. They correspond with the NTPs, and then 2 corresponds with the NTPs and the SFJs. Sorry. And then 2 corresponds with the STPs and the NFJs, and then 3 corresponds with the NTJs and the SFPs, and then 5 corresponds with the NFPs and the STJs.
Right.
Just because it just felt right.
Yeah.
I was like, the NTPs are always trying to get things to one substance, and it's usually at the intersection of 2 axes.
Right. It's not just the numbers, it's like the shape represented by the numbers. It's very Greek in that way.
The STPs, NFJs, I feel are the strongest,
2 poles.
2 poles. Yeah, exactly.
2 worlds.
Good
one
and evil.
family.
Exactly.
Good and evil.
Yeah, and they are also kind of enantiodromia, kind of inseparable, but still poles. The NTJs and the SFPs are just, big on hierarchy and...
Yeah, so you get the triangle.
Yeah.
Pyramid.
And then the NFPs and the STJs... The NFPs, and the STJs, actually, I always associate with, essentially... I mean, the pentagram in traditional symbolism is the intersection of the 4 elements plus the will, so that there's this extra there's this extra thing that's riding on on materiality. And then the way that the upside down pentagram kind of functions as basically diversity as the unitive is what brings something together. It's I don't know, that kind of reminds me of NFP stuff.
Yeah. Well, the way that I had been sort of, I was trying to create just shapes or symbols to kind of quickly represent the quadras because I was bored. And it happened to kind of line up in a way with what you were doing, because I was imagining the, thank you, cicadas. I was imagining the NFPs, STJs, the anarchist quadra, as I say in Motes and Beams, as a group of rings that form a circle, but each ring is connected with just the 2 that are next to it, but it forms this circle, this unity around itself. And I did that because I just had this intuitive notion of, that seems to be an NFP thing of there not being a one center that rules the whole structure. It is you have this unity of these different elements that, there's no linking between this one over here and this one over here. They're linked by having to go around this way. And I was like, oh, well, you can do that with just 5 rings, and then you link the 5 rings up with the pentacle, the pentagram sort of idea, which is a very ancient symbol. It is not. It's only more recently Satanism, because they took it and they're like, oh, we'll flip it upside down, and now it represents, I don't know, chaos and something like that. But traditionally, it has a much more deeper meaning of exactly what you said. It's almost like, I think of it almost like materialism when you turn it upside down in that way. Because now you have the two, the disunity is what is on top, and the will is down on bottom.
The flies are coming for us now that we're talking about the pentagrams.
Oh no. That is kind of spooky, isn't it? That's what we'll title this video.
Yeah, Beelzebub is coming for us.
Yeah. Well, we better switch topics. And then the cross for the NTPs, that intersection, and then I drew like a series of like concentric circles for the STP NFJs, because you still have this notion of kind of hierarchy that I feel like comes from SENI in a way, but it's like also this unity, so you're expanding out from this one central circle, and then you have like the outside circle, so it's all kind of lined up. And the reason I tied that with 2 is because it's very circular, so I just have the radius of that is the through line, so you have the center point and then every point on the outside. And then the pyramid for the NTJs and SFPs, and I did all this with rings, so it was like 4. No, sorry, it was, each one had 5 rings. So 5 rings, yeah, each one has 5 rings. So you have the 5 rings in a circle for the NFPs. Nice. You have a line, a chain of rings, but going from largest to smallest for the NTJs and SFPs, forming this kind of hierarchy where you have the smallest one at the top, and then it links down to the largest one at the bottom. And then you have the concentric rings, 5 of those for the NFJs, STPs, and then finally you have 5 rings, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, and then 1 in the center, kind of like a Venn diagram for the NTPs, SFJs. So you end up, this is interesting because you end up with this kind of interesting pictorial metaphors going on, where the TEFI has no center point, and whereas FETI does, and NESI has this equality or lack of hierarchy going on, whereas the SENI does. And I don't fully know what that would even necessarily mean. It may not even need to mean anything, but I just found it fun. So there we go.
Yeah, it's cool that we linked up in the same week. It was very interesting.
Yes, it was. There were a number of synchronicities there as we've been talking about some of these things. So it's been very neat. So yeah, so that's why he mentioned Satanism.
Right.
So if you want to dig your grave by saying NFPs are of Satan, or something,
sorry.
This might not be quite.
No,
I am not saying that.
Sorry, tell the ENFPs I love you. I do love multiple.
Yes,
multiple
you do.
ENFPs.
That's why I knew it couldn't. You meant it as a joke. Sorry, I made a big deal out of it.
It's okay.
Knew that our viewership needed to know
what
was going on.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's everything that we wanted to talk about here.
Cool.
So, John?
Cool. Pleasure.
I will, I'll go get my bags and leave now.
Get out of
and
here.
just start walking away. All right, take care, everybody. Thanks for watching.
You want to show them the beautiful tree nest?
Yes, we should show them the trees, just the trees around.
You can do it 360.
Yeah, and that way you won't be looking at me in the shadows. Sorry about the lighting, everybody. But yeah, so we'll kind of turn you here. Hopefully you can see that okay. Yes, it is very lovely. John is not used to this.
I am a Southern California boy, and this is...
Yes, that is where he's from.
Very green.
I am.
compared to that.
I am more used to the East Coast areas.
Here in England.
Here in England, yes.
East Coast of England.
It's just like New England, where I grew up. Here in England.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I hope you enjoyed that. All the greenery, and we good?
Yep.
We're good.
Bye.
Thumbnail. All right.